Handbook for Mankind, 10. Insight, by organized training. Now we shall deal with the organized systems of insight training, which were not taught by the Buddha but were developed by later teachers. This kind of practice is suitable for people at a fairly undeveloped stage, who still cannot perceive the unsatisfactoriness of worldly existence with their own eyes, naturally. This doesn't mean, however, that the results obtained by these systems have any special qualities not obtainable by the nature method, because when we examine the Tipitaka closely, we find the nature method is the only one mentioned. Some people consider, however, that natural insight can be developed only by someone who has become so remarkably virtuous, or has such a suitable disposition, that for him to come to a full understanding of things is just child's play. What is a person to do who lacks transcendent virtues and the appropriate disposition? For such people, teachers laid down ordered systems of practice, concise courses which start from scratch and have to be followed through thoroughly and systematically. These systems of practice for developing insight are now known by the technical term vipassana, dhira. Vipassana, dhira is contrasted with study, gantha, dhira, the two being considered nowadays complementary aspects of training. Vipassana dhira is study done within, it is strictly mental training, having nothing to do with textbooks. Neither the term study, gantha, dhira, nor vipassana, dhira is mentioned in the Tipitaka, both appearing only in later books. But vipassana, dhira is nevertheless a genuine Buddhist practice, designed for people intent on eliminating suffering. It is based directly on sustained, concentrated introspection. In order to explain vipassana to people, teachers in former ages considered it in terms of the following questions. What is the basis, the foundation of vipassana? What are the characteristics by which we may know that this is vipassana? Just what is the activity called vipassana? What should be the ultimate result of vipassana? Asked what is the basis, the foundation of vipassana, we answer, morality and concentration. Vipassana means clear insight, and refers to the unobscured vision that may arise when a person's mind is full of joy and devoid of any defilement. Joy develops when there is moral purity, sila visuddhi, morality is a prerequisite. This is stated in the texts, Radhavanita Sutta, Majjhima, Nikaya, 24. Where the practice is described as proceeding in a series of stages called the 7 purifications, and culminating in the path and the fruit. Teachers regard the attainment of moral purity as the first of the 7 purifications. It consists of faultless behavior and is prerequisite to purification of the mind, citta, visuddhi. Purification of the mind, achieved when the mind has been rendered free of any contamination, is conducive to purification of views, ditha visuddhi, or freedom from misunderstanding. Freedom from misunderstanding leads to purity by freedom from doubt, kankavatarana visuddhi. And this conduces in its turn to the arising of purity by knowledge and vision of what is the true path to be followed and what is not the path, magga, nanadasana, visuddhi. This knowledge of the path to be followed leads to the purity by knowledge and vision of the progress along the path patipada, nanadasana visuddhi. This finally leads to the last stage of full intuitive insight or purity of knowledge and vision, nanadasana, visuddhi, which is the perfection of the very noble path. Because the fruit of the path arises automatically once the path is established, the attainment of the path is regarded as the culmination of the practice. Moral purity is faultless behavior by way of body and speech. As long as any imperfection in body or speech remains, morality in the true sense is lacking. When it has been perfected, that is, when tranquility of bodily activities and speech has been achieved, the result is bound to be mental tranquility, conducive in its turn to the further stages of purification, freedom from misunderstanding, freedom from doubt. Knowledge as to what is the path to be followed and what is not, knowledge and vision of the progress along the path, and finally full intuitive insight. These last 5 stages constitute vipassana proper. Purification of conduct and mind are merely the entrance into the path of vipassana. The 7 purifications, the 5 stages in Vipassana, and the 9 steps in the perfection of knowledge. I. Moral purity. 2. Mental purity. 3. 1. Freedom from false views. 4. 2. Freedom from doubt. 3. Knowledge and vision of what is the true path. 6. 4. Knowledge and vision of the progress along the path. A. Knowledge of arising and passing away. B. Knowledge of passing away. C. Awareness of fearsomeness. D. Awareness of danger. E. Disenchantment. F. Desire for freedom. G. Struggle to escape. H. Imperturbability. I. Readiness to perceive the Four Noble Truths. 7. 5. Full intuitive insight. The purification consisting of freedom from misunderstanding implies the elimination of all false views, both inborn and acquired. It covers the whole range from irrational belief in magic to false ideas as to the true nature of things. For instance, regarding this body and mind as something enduring, something worthwhile, a self. Seeing it as animal, human being, celestial being, or God, or as something magical or sacred. Failing to perceive that it consists of just the 4 elements, or of just body plus mind, and regarding it instead as a self, as possessing a soul or spirit, which enters and leaves it. Failing to see it as consisting of the 5 aggregates, body, feeling, perception, active thinking, and consciousness. Failing to see it as just a mass of perceptions received by way of the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. False views lead to belief in magic and sacred objects, and so give rise to fear. Rites and rituals are then performed to neutralize the fear, and the end result is firm attachment to rites and rituals, all on account of false views. Such a situation indicates views that are not as yet faultless. To have given up false views is to have attained what was originally called the 3rd purification, and what later teachers classed the 1st stage in Vipassana. The purification consisting of freedom from doubt is brought about by introspection into causes. With freedom from false views, one sees oneself as just body plus mind. Freedom from doubt consists in perceiving the nature of the causes responsible for the coming into existence of the body-mind complex. One sees penetratingly and in fine detail the coming into existence and the interaction of ignorance, desire, grasping and clinging, karma, nutriment, and so on, to form body and mind. Freedom from doubt results simply from this clear knowledge of the causes and effects of all things. In the Vipassana system, teachers recognize 20 or 30 kinds of doubt, but summed up they all amount to doubt as to whether or not oneself exists, whether or not oneself existed previously, whether or not oneself will continue to exist in the future, and, if so, in what form. The only way doubt can be completely dispelled is to realize that there is no I, but only elements, aggregates, a nervous system together with such causes as ignorance, craving and attachment, karma, nutriment, and so on. Because no real I is involved at all, one starts giving up the foolish idea, I am, I have been, I shall be. With the complete eradication of doubt, the 2nd stage in Vipassana has been achieved. This does not mean that the I conceit has been given up for good and all, fine vestiges are still present. Adequate understanding of the mode of interaction of causes has resulted in the dispelling of doubt and has made it possible to give up the idea of I in its grossest forms. When doubt has been transcended, it becomes possible to bring about the purification consisting of perfect knowledge as to what is the right path to follow and what is not. There exist several obstacles to this further progress, which usually arise in the course of Vipassana practice. While the mind is in a concentrated state, there are likely to arise various strange phenomena with which the meditator may become overawed. Such as wonderful impressive auras seen in the mind's eye, the physical eyes being shut. If these effects are purposely encouraged, they can become highly developed. And if the meditator jumps to the conclusion that this is the fruit of Vipassana practice, or congratulates himself saying, this is something supernatural, this will do me, and the like, the arising of these phenomena is liable to bar the way to the true path and fruit. Consequently, teachers consider it a side track, a blind alley. Another example is the arising of feelings of joy and contentment which continually overflow the mind to such an extent that it becomes incapable of any further introspection, or jumps to the conclusion that this is nirvana, right here and now, so that the way becomes blocked and further progress is impossible. This is another obstruction to insight. Teachers say, furthermore, that even insight into the nature of body and mind may sometimes lead to self-satisfaction and the delusion that the meditator has a remarkable degree of spiritual insight, so that he becomes overconfident. This too is an obstacle to progress in vipassana. Occasionally the meditator may make use of the mental power he has developed to make his body go rigid, with the result that he loses the awareness necessary for further introspection. This is a stubborn obstacle in the path to further progress, yet meditators usually approve of it, regarding it as a supernatural faculty, or even as the fruit of the path. Anyone who becomes so pleased with and infatuated by the attainment of deep concentration, this sitting with body rigid and devoid of all sensation, that he is unable to progress further in vipassana, is in a most pitiable position. Another condition that may very easily come about is a blissful rapture the like of which the meditator has never encountered before. Once arisen, it induces wonder and amazement and unjustified self-satisfaction. While the rapture lasts, he, body, and the mind experience extreme bliss and all problems vanish. Things that formerly were liked or disliked are liked or disliked no longer when recalled to mind. Things the meditator had formerly feared and dreaded or worried and fretted over no longer induce those reactions, so that he gets the false idea that he has already attained liberation, freedom from all defilements. Because for as long as he is in that condition he has all the characteristics of a genuinely perfected individual. Should satisfaction arise with respect to this condition, it acts as an obstacle to further progress in vipassana. And in time the condition will fade away so that things formerly liked or disliked will be liked or disliked again just as before, or even more so. Yet another kind of obstacle involves faith. Faith or confidence never felt before becomes firmly established, for example confidence in the threefold gem, Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, or in theories the meditator thinks out for himself. There may even come about a most intense satisfaction in Dhamma. The ability to remain unmoved by anything becomes so strongly developed that it may even delude the meditator into believing he has already attained the fruit of the path and nirvana itself. These things are a great difficulty for anyone encountering them for the first time. As you can see, they constitute a barrier in the way of vipassana. The meditator, however, is likely to regard them as highly desirable until such time as he develops the unobscured knowledge that these things are in fact obstacles, and succeeds in cutting out these finer defilements completely. This knowledge of what is the right path and what is not constitutes the third stage in vipassana and the fifth purification. Until such time as the aspirant has developed this knowledge of what really constitutes the right path, he has to be always steering himself away from the various side tracks. Once this knowledge of the path to be followed has become fully established, however, any further knowledge will automatically develop along the right line. It will progress step by step, bringing perfectly clear understanding of the true nature of things and ultimately perfect freedom from, and non-involvement in things. The mind, equipped with this right understanding, is all set to attain insight into the Four Noble Truths, and is said to have attained the purity by knowledge and vision of the progress along the path. This is counted as the fourth stage in vipassana and the sixth purification. The Tipitaka contains no detailed explanation of the stages in this knowledge and vision of the progress along the path, but later teachers recognized in it 9 steps, as follows. A. Vipassana has progressed properly, and the birth, aging, pain and death of phenomena have been thoroughly scrutinized. The arising and passing away of phenomena has been perceived in all clarity. All phenomenal existence is seen to consist of just an endless process of arising and ceasing, like the glittering dazzle on the surface of the sea, or like the forming and bursting of the foamy crests of waves. This is known as knowledge of arising and passing away, Udayabhayanupassana, Nana. It is brought about by concentrated introspection so clear, and sustained for so long a time that the knowledge becomes firmly established. Like a dye absorbed by the mind, powerful enough to make the meditator become disenchanted with things and give up clinging to them. This is the first step in the knowledge and vision of the progress along the path. b. Arising and passing away, if observed simultaneously, cannot be perceived with such clarity as they can if either one is concentrated on separately. At this stage, the meditator gives up watching one of the two, namely arising, and concentrates exclusively on the passing away. This permits him to see the process of disintegration and decay in such depth and intensity that he comes to realize that decay and perishing are universally evident no matter where in the world one looks. A mind dwelling in this knowledge is said to be equipped with knowledge of decay and dissolution, Bhajanupassana, Jnana. This is the second step in the developing of knowledge. c. Knowledge of decay and dissolution, when sufficiently well developed, gives rise next to the awareness that all things are to be feared. All phenomenal existence, whether in the sensual realm, in the form realm, or in the formless realm, is seen as inherently fearsome. All spheres of existence are seen as thoroughly fearsome because the decay and dissolution of all phenomena is perceived in every conscious moment. Thus an intense apprehension arises in the mind of one possessing this awareness and becomes established as a genuine fear. This awareness sees nothing but fearsomeness, like poison, or deadly weapons, or vicious armed bandits, completely filling the three spheres of phenomenal existence, nothing but fearsomeness. This awareness of the fearsomeness, Bhajapathananana, of all phenomenal existence is reckoned as the third step. d. When awareness of the completely fearsome nature of all phenomenal existence has been fully developed, there will arise in its turn awareness that all things are inherently dangerous. To become involved in things is not safe. They are like a forest full of dangerous beasts, and anyone seeking diversion in the forest finds nothing pleasing there. This awareness of the danger, Adinavanupasana, Jnana, inherent in all phenomenal existence is the fourth step. When all things are seen to be in every way full of danger, this gives rise to disenchantment. Things are seen as resembling a burnt-out house of which nothing remains but ashes and a skeleton, utterly unattractive. This disenchantment, Nibbidhanupassana, Jnana, with having to be associated with conditioned things is the fifth step in the developing of knowledge. When genuine disenchantment has become established, there arises a desire to become really free from those things. This is quite unlike our ordinary desire for freedom, which, lacking the power of concentration or insight to boost it up, is not real desire for freedom. The disenchantment arising out of vipassana insight involves the entire mind. And the desire for freedom is as great as the disenchantment, so is very real and genuine. This desire to escape from the unsatisfactoriness of phenomenal existence is as great as the desire for freedom of a frog struggling to escape from a snake's jaws, or the desire for freedom of a deer or bird struggling to break loose from a snare. This real desire to escape, Munsita Kamayita, Jnana, from unsatisfactoriness is the sixth step. Now with the full development of the desire to escape, there arises a feeling of an intense struggling to find a way out, an ever-present feeling that, phenomenal existence being as it is, one has to escape from it. Introspecting, one perceives the clinging and one perceives the defilements that are the cause of the mind's bondage, the fetters binding it securely to that condition. Consequently, one seeks for ways of weakening the defilements. Then, seeing the defilements weakened, one sets about destroying them completely. This weakening of the defilements is illustrated by means of a simile. A man goes to his fish trap and pulls out a snake thinking it to be a fish. When told it is a snake, he doesn't believe it, at least not until he meets a wise, benevolent and sympathetic teacher, who guides and instructs him so that he comes to realize that it is in fact a snake. He then becomes afraid and searches about for a means of killing it. He grabs the snake by the neck and, lifting it above his head, swings it in a circle until it is worn out and falls down dead. This simile illustrates the arising of the knowledge that the defilements are the cause of people's bondage to a condition much to be feared and dreaded. If one has no technique for reducing the force of the defilements day by day, eradicating them is bound to be impossible. The power of the defilements far exceeds that of the still meager knowledge to be used in destroying them. Hence knowledge must be developed and increased, and the suffering produced by the defilements will simultaneously diminish. Always maintaining and developing the knowledge that all things are transient, worthless, and devoid of selfhood. That they are not worth getting or being, serves to cut off the food supply to the defilements, weakening them day by day. It behooves us to build ourselves up, develop, become more skillful and ingenious. By this means, we can conquer defilements the size of mountains. Small though we may be, our situation can be compared to that of a small mouse faced with the job of killing several tigers. We have to be really steadfast and always on the lookout for means appropriate to a small mouse. If we get nowhere, we must use all sorts of devices and techniques to weaken those tigers day by day rather than trying to kill them outright. This intense search for a way of escape, Patisankanupassana, Jnana, constitutes the seventh step in the knowledge and vision of the progress along the path. H. This weakening of the defilements serves to make us progressively more and more independent of and oblivious to things. So this next step in the developing of right understanding, which results in imperturbability with respect to all things, consists in seeing all phenomena as empty, as devoid of essence, as devoid of status such as animal or person, devoid of substance or real permanence, devoid of worth because they are thoroughly unsatisfactory, and devoid of all attraction because they are thoroughly disenchanting. Ultimately the mind becomes independent of and unperturbed by anything in any realm of existence. Things formerly likable, desirable, and infatuating, come to be seen as lumps of rock and earth. This too has been explained by means of a simile. A man who has always loved a certain woman may one day experience a change of heart and stop loving her. For instance, he will stop loving his wife if she is unfaithful. Once divorced, however, he is free to go ahead and do as he pleases, his mind can be unperturbed. And at this level of knowledge, conditions hitherto delightful, each in its own way, are recognized as devoid of substance. So that one can be independent of them and unperturbed by them in all circumstances, just like the man who becomes independent on divorcing his wife. This indifference to all phenomena, Sankarupekha, Jnana, is the eighth step. The mind thus independent of and unmoved by all phenomenal existence is ready to perfect the path and know the Four Noble Truths, Sakanyalomaka, Jnana. At this stage one is all set to overcome the defilements, to break the fetters binding one to the world, and become an Aryan of one degree or another. This is the ninth step in the process of knowledge and vision of the progress along the path. When this stepwise developing of knowledge, from knowledge of arising and passing away up to the state of readiness to perceive the Four Noble Truths, has been carried through to completion, one is said to have achieved the fourth state in Vipassana, or the sixth purification. The pure and perfect knowledge it yields is an instrument that reveals to the meditator the path by which he has come, and can lead on to the perfect intuitive insight that will destroy the defilements. This perfect intuitive insight, or purity of knowledge and vision, the seventh purification, is the insight that arises out of the perfected path. It is the goal, the fruit of Vipassana practice. This insight that arises out of the perfected path is the fifth and final stage in Vipassana. In between the state of readiness to perceive the noble truths and this perfect intuitive insight comes qualifying knowledge, Gotprabhu, Jnana, which marks the point of transition from the ordinary defiled individual to the Aryan. But this qualifying knowledge lasts only an instant. It is the culmination of the progressive perfection of knowledge and is still at the level of good karma, still in the sensual realm. To sum up, then, Vipassana has as its foundation morality and concentration. What do we examine? The answer is, we examine all things, or to use other terms, the world, or phenomenal existence, or conditioned things, or the five aggregates, since all phenomenal existence consists of nothing apart from the five aggregates. What do we aim at seeing as a result of this scrutiny? We aim at seeing the transience, the unsatisfactoriness, the non-selfhood inherent in all things in the world. We observe them arising, persisting, and ceasing until we come to perceive them as absolutely fearsome and disenchanting, and realize that nothing is worth getting or being. These are the conditions that ought to arise in Vipassana practice. What is the objective of Vipassana? The immediate objective of Vipassana is to reduce delusion, the meaning of Vipassana being clear vision. What is the fruit of Vipassana? The fruit is the arising of clear intuitive insight, clear and enduring insight into the nature of all things, which ultimately will reduce the defilements to nothing. With the defilements gone, there is just perfection, enlightenment, peace. Nothing remains to bind the mind to any worldly condition. As a result, there comes about a slipping free from the world, this place of slavery to sensuality. The mind is freed of suffering because it's freed for good of all craving or desire. The Buddha called this the attainment of the cessation of suffering, the attainment of the fruit of the path, nirvana. To have achieved this is to have carried out to completion the task Buddhism has set for us. This shows us the path of insight that has to be walked. There are 7 stages of purification which must be integrated in this way, and 9 steps in the process of developing knowledge of the world. These taken together are known as Vipassana. In the texts it is set out as an ordered system. The finer details can be found in the books written by later teachers. There is one important thing that must be realized. However, in order to avoid misunderstanding, it so happens that even in the field of Dhamma practice, the highest aspect of Buddhism, there are misguided people. At the present time there are many who have got hold of things that are not Vipassana at all and are presenting them as being the real thing. They have made Vipassana practice their means of livelihood. They win people over in order to get classes together, then proceed to certify them as noble ones, Aryapagala, modern style, all of which is most despicable and regrettable. Handbook for Mankind, 11. Emancipation from the world. Vipassana meditation is mental training aimed at raising the mind to such a level that it is no longer subject to suffering. The mind breaks free from suffering by virtue of the clear knowledge that nothing is worth grasping at or clinging to. This knowledge deprives worldly things of their ability to lead the mind into further thoughtless liking or disliking. Having this knowledge, the mind transcends the worldly condition and attains the level known as the supramundane plane, Lokuttara Bhumi. In order to comprehend clearly the supramundane plane, we have to know first about its opposite, the mundane plane, Lokiyab Bhumi. The mundane plane comprises those levels at which the things of the world have control over the mind. Very briefly, 3 levels are recognized in the mundane plane, namely, the sensual level, Kamavikara Bhumi, or the level of a mind still content with pleasures of every kind, the level of forms, Rupavakara Bhumi, the condition of a mind uninterested in sensual objects, but finding satisfaction in the various stages of concentration on forms as objects, and lastly the formless level, Arupavakara Bhumi. The yet higher level of a mind finding satisfaction in the bliss and peace of concentration on objects other than forms. These 3 levels in the worldly plane are the mental levels of beings in general. Regardless of whether we presume to call them human beings, celestial beings, gods, beasts, or denizens of hell, they are all included within the 3 worldly levels. The mind of a worldling can at any particular time exist in any one of these 3. It is not impossible. It is quite normal. As a rule, though, it will tend to fall back naturally to the unconcentrated sensual level. The human mind normally falls under the influence of the delightful in colors and shapes, sounds, odors, tastes and tactile objects. Only on certain occasions is it able to escape from the influence of these seductive things and experience the tranquility and bliss which comes from practicing concentration on forms or other objects. It all depends on concentration. At certain times, then, a person's mind may be located in any of these levels of concentration. In India at the time of the Buddha this must have been fairly common. Because people who had gone in search of the tranquility and bliss associated with the various levels of concentration were to be found living in forests all over the country. At the present time such people are few, but it is nevertheless possible for the ordinary man to attain these levels. If someone in this world is in the process of experiencing the bliss of full concentration on a form, then for him the world consists of just that form, because he is aware of nothing else. At that time and for that person, the world is equivalent to just that one form, and it remains so until such time as his mental condition changes. Even though a person dwelling in any of these three levels may have gained such bliss and calm tranquility that he has come to resemble a rock, a lump of earth, or a log of wood, yet grasping and clinging to selfhood are still present. Also present are various kinds of desire, albeit of the finest and most tenuous sort, such as dissatisfaction with the state in which he finds himself, which prompts him to go in search of a new state. That desire for change constitutes karma, so such a person has not yet transcended the worldly state. He is not yet in the supramundane plane. A mind dwelling in the supramundane plane has transcended the world. It views the worldly state as devoid of essence, self, or substance, and will have nothing of it. Dwellers in this supramundane plane can be further classified into grades. There are 4 levels of path and fruit, namely the levels of the stream, enterer, sotapanna, the once, returner, skitagama, the never, returner, anagama, and the completely perfected individual or arahant. The condition of these 4 kinds of noble individuals or Aryans is the supramundane condition. Supramundane means above the world, and refers to the mind, not the body. The body can be anywhere at all as long as living conditions are adequate. Supramundane simply describes a mind dwelling above the world. As for the nether worlds such as hell, purgatory, or the places of suffering, torment and bondage, these are out of the question for the Aryans. The criteria for recognizing these 4 levels in the supramundane plane are the various mental impurities which are in the course of being eliminated. The Buddha divided the impurities in this group into 10 kinds. He called them the fetters, samayojana. These 10 fetters bind man and all beings to the world, keeping people in the mundane plane. If a person starts to cut through these fetters and break loose, his mind gradually and progressively becomes freed from the worldly condition, and when he manages to cut through them completely, his mind becomes completely free, transcends the world for good and comes to dwell permanently in the supramundane plane. Of these 10 kinds of subtle mental impurities that bind us, the first is the self-belief, sakyaditya, the view that the body and mind is myself. It is a misunderstanding or misconception based on clinging to the idea I am. b. Because the average person is not aware of the true nature of the body and the mind, he unthinkingly regards these two as his self. He assumes that body and mind is his self, his I. This instinctive idea that there is an I and a mine is so firmly ingrained that normally nobody ever doubts their existence. True, the self-instinct is what makes life possible, being the basis of self-preservation, the search for food and propagation of the species. But in this case, what we are calling the self-belief is to be taken only in its most basic sense as the root cause of selfishness. This is considered to be the first of the fetters, to be done away with before anything else. The second fetter is doubt, visikaka, the cause of wavering and uncertainty. Most importantly, it is doubt concerning the practice leading to liberation from suffering, doubt due to inadequate knowledge. Doubt as to what the subject is really all about, doubt as to whether this practice for breaking free from suffering is really the right thing for one. Whether one is really capable of carrying it through, whether it is really better than other things, whether or not it really does any good. Whether the Buddha really did attain enlightenment, whether he really did achieve liberation from suffering. Whether the Buddha's teaching and the practical method based on his teaching really do lead to liberation from suffering. Whether it is really possible for a bhikkhu in the Sangha to attain liberation from suffering. The root cause of hesitancy is ignorance. A fish that has always lived in the water, if told about life on dry land, would be sure to believe none of it, or at most only half of it. We, immersed as we are in sensuality, are as habituated to sensuality as is the fish to water, so that when someone speaks of transcending sensuality, transcending the world, we can't understand. And that which we can understand to some extent we are hesitant about. It is natural for us to think on this lower level, to think on the high level produces a new picture. The conflict between the high-level thinking and the low-level thinking is what constitutes wavering. If mental energy is insufficient, the low-level thinking will triumph. Doubt and wavering with regard to goodness is something chronically present in everyone right from birth. In a person who has been brought up wrongly, it may be a very common complaint. We have to introspect and note the bad consequences of this wavering, which is present to such an extent in our work and our everyday living that we become skeptical about goodness, truth, and liberation from suffering. The third fetter is superstition, Silabbataparamasa, or attachment to rules and rituals based on a misunderstanding of their real purpose. Essentially, it is a misguided attachment to certain things one does. Usually it has to do with doctrines and ceremonies. An example of this is belief in magic and magical practices, which is blatantly just superstition and occurs even among Buddhists. Practice based on the belief that it will produce magical abilities, psychic powers, and protective forces is founded on false hopes and is irrational. Another example is the undertaking of moral precepts, 5 precepts, etc., or virtuous conduct. The real purpose of this is to eliminate mental defilements. But if we believe that it will give rise to miraculous powers which we shall then be able to use to eradicate the defilements, we are in fact grasping and clinging, and so defeating our original purpose. The practice is quite correct in itself, but if we misunderstand it and cling to it irrationally, regarding it as something magical or sacred, then it becomes pure superstition. Even taking upon oneself the moral precepts, if done in the belief that it will lead to rebirth as a celestial being, is without a doubt an example of attachment to rules and rituals and goes contrary to Buddhist aims. Such beliefs contaminate otherwise virtuous conduct. The objective of the Buddhist discipline is the elimination of the cruder defilements of body and speech as a foundation for the progressive development of concentration and insight. The objective is not rebirth in heaven. To have such false motives is to soil and contaminate one's own morals with grasping and clinging, with false ideas. Charity, or adherence to moral precepts, or meditation practice, if carried out with a mistaken idea of their true objective, inevitably will stray from the Buddhist path. Do understand that even Buddhist practice associated with misunderstanding because craving has come in and taken over, bringing the expectation of mystical powers, becomes superstition instead. This applies to even the very small and trivial things that most of us like to indulge in, such as ritual chanting, merit making, and the like. The ceremony of placing rice and trays of sweets before the Buddha's image, if performed in the belief that it is an offering to the Buddha's spirit and that he will be able to partake of it, is 100% certain to produce effects precisely the opposite of what the devotee is hoping for. Behavior that defeats its own true purpose is generally quite common in Buddhist circles. It is foolish and irrational and results in practices originally worthwhile and attractive becoming contaminated with the stupidity and ignorance of the people performing them. This is what is meant by superstition. As we can see, this defilement has its origins in delusion and misunderstanding. Most of us have our own ingrown beliefs in mystical powers as a result of having been misinformed and led astray by others. We need not go into any more detail here, but though it may be rather disturbing, everyone ought to do some critical self-examination along these lines. When these first 3 defilements, namely self-belief, doubt, and superstition, have been completely given up, one is said to have attained the lowest level in the supramundane plane, that is, to have become a stream enterer. To give up completely these 3 defilements is not difficult at all, because they are just primitive qualities possessed by primitive, underdeveloped people. In anyone who has studied well and made progress, these 3 elements should not be present, and if they are, then that person's mind should be considered still primitive. Anyone ought to be able to give up these 3 defilements and become an Aryan. If he can't, he is still a foolish and deluded person, or, to use the best term, a worldling, Puthujjayana, someone with a thick blindfold covering the eye of insight. When any individual has managed to give up these defilements, his mind is freed from bondage to the world. These three are ignorance and delusion obscuring the truth and are fetters binding the mind to the world. Giving them up is like rendering ineffective three kinds of bondage or three blindfolds, then slipping free and rising above and beyond the world, into the first supramundane level. This is what it is to become an Aryan of the first degree, to attain the first level in the supramundane plane. Such an individual is called a stream, enterer. One who has attained for the first time the stream that flows onto nirvana. In other words, an individual at this stage is certain to attain nirvana at some time in the future. What he has attained is only the stream of nirvana, not nirvana itself. This stream is a course that flows right onto nirvana, inclining towards nirvana just as the water course of a river slopes down towards the sea. Though it may still take some time, a mind which has once entered the stream is certain to achieve nirvana eventually. Attaining the second level in the supramundane plane implies giving up the three fetters just mentioned, and further, being able to attenuate certain types of craving, aversion, and delusion to such a degree that the mind becomes elevated and only very feebly attached to sensuality. It is traditionally held that an individual who achieves this level will return to this world at most only once more, hence he is known as a once-returner. A once-returner is closer to nirvana than a stream, enterer, there remaining in him no more than a trace of worldliness. Should he return to the sensual human world, he will do so not more than once, because craving, aversion and delusion, though not completely eliminated, have become exceedingly attenuated. The third stage is that of the never-returner. This grade of Aryan, besides having succeeded in giving up the defilements to the extent necessary for becoming a once-returner, has also managed to give up the fourth and fifth fetters. The fourth fetter is sensual desire and the fifth is ill will. Neither the stream, enterer nor the once-returner has completely given up sensual desire. In both of them there is still a remnant of satisfaction in alluring and desirable objects. Even though they have managed to give up self-belief, doubt, and superstition, they are still unable to relinquish completely their attachment to sensuality, of which some traces remain. But an Aryan at the third stage, a never-returner, has succeeded in giving it up completely, so that not a trace remains. The defilement called ill will, which includes all feelings of anger or resentment, has been washed out to a large extent by the once-returner, so that there remains only a trace of ill humor to obstruct his mind. But the never-returner has got rid of it altogether. Thus the never-returner has thrown off both sensual desire and ill will. This sensual desire or attachment to and satisfaction in sensuality was explained adequately in the section on sensual attachment. It is a chronic defilement, firmly fixed in the mind as if it were a very part of it, of the same substance. For the ordinary man, it is hard to understand and hard to eradicate. Anything at all can serve as an object for desire: colors and shapes, sounds, odors, tastes and tactile objects of any sort, kind, and description. These are sensual objects, and the state of mental attachment which takes the form of satisfaction in these desirable objects is sensual desire, raga. What we call ill will is the reaction of a mind that feels dissatisfaction. If there is satisfaction, there is sensual desire; if dissatisfaction, ill will. Most people's minds are subject to these two states. There may arise ill will towards even inanimate objects, and what is more, one can even be dissatisfied with the things one has produced oneself, the things that arise in one's own mind. Where there is actual hatred and anger towards an object, ill will has become too fierce. An Aryan at a stage below the non-returnee has given it up to a degree appropriate to his station. The ill will that remains for the third grade of Aryan to relinquish is just a mental reaction so subtle that possibly no outward evidence of it appears. It is an inner perturbation not revealed by any facial expression, yet present inwardly as dissatisfaction, as irritation or annoyance at some person or thing that does not conform to expectation. Imagine a person completely devoid of every form of ill will. Consider what a very exceptional individual he would be, and how worthy of respect. The 5 defilements we have just been discussing were grouped together by the Buddha as the first to be given up. Self-belief, doubt, superstition, sensual desire, and ill will have all been given up by an Aryan at the 3rd level. Because there remains no sensual desire, this grade of Aryan never again returns to the sensual state of existence. This is why he gets the name never, returner, one who will never come back. For him there is only movement forward and upward to Aryantship and Nirvana. In a state having nothing to do with sensuality, a supreme, divine condition. As for the 5 remaining defilements, these only the Arahant, the 4th grade of Aryan, succeeds in relinquishing completely. The next defilement, the 6th of the fetters, is desire for the bliss associated with the various stages of concentration on forms, rupa, raga. The first 3 grades of Aryan are still not capable of giving up attachment to the bliss and tranquility obtainable by concentrating deeply on forms. But they will succeed in doing so when they move up to the last stage, that of the Arahant. The fully concentrated state has a captivating flavor, which can be described as a foretaste of nirvana. Though it differs from real nirvana, it has more or less the same flavor. While one is fully concentrated, the defilements are dormant, but they have not evaporated away entirely, and will reappear as soon as concentration is lost. As long as they are dormant, however, the mind is empty, clear, free, and knows the flavor of real nirvana. Consequently, the state can also become a cause of attachment. The 7th subtle defilement is desire for the bliss associated with full concentration on objects other than forms, arupa, raga. It resembles the 6th fetter, but is 1 degree more subtle and attenuated. Concentration on an object such as space or emptiness yields a tranquility and quiescence more profound than concentration on a form, with the result that one becomes attached to that state. No Arahant could ever become fascinated by any state of pleasant feeling whatsoever, regardless of where it originated. Because an Arahant is automatically aware of the impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-selfhood of every state of feeling. Other hermits and mystics practicing concentration in the forest do not perceive the hidden danger in these blissful states, and so become fascinated by and attached to the flavor of them, just as immature people become attached to the flavor of sensual objects. For this reason the Buddha used the same word desire for both cases. If you think this subject over and really come to understand it, you will be full of admiration and respect for these individuals called Aryans. The 8th fetter binding a man to the world is awareness of superiority or inferiority, mana. It is the delusion of having this or that status relative to another. It consists in the thought, I am not as good as he is. I am just as good as he is. I am better or higher than he is. Thinking I am not as good as, one feels inferior; thinking I am better than, one feels puffed up; and thinking I am just as good as, one thinks along competitive lines or in terms of getting ahead of the other fellow. It is not pride or conceit. Not to think automatically of oneself as better or worse than the other fellow in this fashion is bound to be very difficult. The placing of this defilement as number 8 is probably meant to indicate that it is hard to give up and so belongs near the end of the list. Only the highest grade of Aryan can relinquish it. The likes of us naturally can't give it up. This idea that one is better than, or on a par with, or not as good as the other fellow, comes from a certain kind of attachment. As long as the mind is still involved in good and bad, the awareness of inferiority, superiority, or equality with respect to others remains to disturb it. But when it has completely transcended good and bad, such ideas cannot exist. As long as such ideas do remain, real bliss and tranquility are lacking. The 9th fetter is agitation, udaka, that is, mental unrest, distraction, lack of peace and quiet. This is the feeling of agitation that arises when something interesting comes by. We all have certain chronic wishes, particularly a desire to get, to be, not to get, or not to be, one thing or another. When something comes by, via the eye, ear, nose, tongue, or body, which fits in with one of our tendencies, there is likely to come about the mental reaction, pro or con, which we call interest. If we see something new and strange, wavering and curiosity are bound to arise, because there are still things that we want and things that we fear and mistrust. So the mind cannot resist, it has to be interested in the various things that come by. At least that is how it is with an ordinary person. If the object in question happens to coincide with a desire of his, he finds it hard to resist. He is likely to become interested to the point of becoming involved, pleased to the point of forgetting himself. If it is an undesirable object, the mind becomes depressed so that his gratification comes to an end. This is the nature of agitation. The first three grades of Aryan still have curiosity and inquisitiveness about things, but the Arahant has none at all. His mind has abolished all desire for anything whatsoever, it has abolished fear and hatred, worry and anxiety, mistrust and doubt, and all desire to know about and see things. His mind is free. Nothing can provoke or lure him, and arouse inquisitiveness or curiosity, simply because he has abolished partiality. It should be realized that the existence or arising of agitation in any situation is a consequence of some form of desire, even including the desire for knowledge. When desire has been done away with through realizing the impermanence, worthlessness, and non-selfhood of all things, nothing is any longer seen as worth getting or being, and so there is no curiosity about anything. If a bolt of lightning were to strike right beside an Arahant, he would not be interested, because he has no fear of death, or craving for continued existence, or anything of that sort. Even if something dangerous came along, or if something brand new were discovered in the world, he would know no inquisitiveness or curiosity. Because such things have no significance for him. He has no wish to know about anything from the point of view of what it may have to offer him. Because there is nothing that he longs for, he has no curiosity of any kind, and his mind has a purity, a tranquility such as we ordinary folk have never attained. The 10th and last defilement is ignorance. This covers every kind of defilement not yet mentioned. The word ignorance refers to a condition of lack of knowledge, and in this case knowledge means real knowledge, correct knowledge. Naturally, no creature can exist without having some knowledge, but if that knowledge is false, it has the same value as no knowledge. Most people suffer from chronic ignorance or false knowledge, most of us are benighted. The most important questions for human beings are those that ask: what is suffering, really? What is the real cause of the arising of suffering? What is real freedom from suffering? And what is the real way to attain freedom from suffering? If some individual has real knowledge, if he is free of ignorance, he is reckoned as enlightened. The totality of human knowledge is of untold extent, but the Buddha classed most of it as not essential. The Buddha's enlightenment encompassed only what need be known. The Buddha knew all that need be known. The word omniscient or all-knowing means knowing just as much as need be known, it does not include anything non-essential. Ignorance causes people to misidentify suffering as pleasure, to such an extent that they just swim around in circles in a sea of suffering. It also causes them to misidentify the cause of suffering, so that they go blaming the wrong things, spirits, celestial beings, or anything at all as the cause of their pain and misfortune, instead of rectifying the situation by the right means. The making of vows to these spirits and celestial beings is a manifestation of the lowest level of ignorance regarding the complete elimination of suffering by means of eliminating the craving which is its direct cause. The mistaken assumption that the bliss and tranquility or unawareness brought about by deep concentration is the complete extinction of suffering was common in the Buddha's time, and is still promoted in the present day. Certain schools of thought have even come to regard sensuality as an instrument for extinguishing suffering. So that sects with shameful, obscene practices have arisen right in the temples. They firmly believe that sensuality is something quite essential, a kind of vital nourishment. Not content with just the 4 necessities of life, namely food, clothing, shelter, and medicine, they add an extra one, sensuality, making 5 necessities. A person ignorant about the path that leads to the extinction of suffering is liable to act foolishly and be motivated by his own desires. For instance, naively relying on physical things, or on spirits and celestial beings, just as if he had no religion at all. Such a person, though he may be a Buddhist by birth, is able to go to such foolish lengths simply because the power of ignorance prevents his being content with extinguishing suffering by way of the Noble Eightfold Path. Instead he goes about extinguishing suffering by lighting incense and candles, and making pledges to supposedly supernatural things. Every normal person wishes to gain knowledge, but if the knowledge he gains is false, then the more he knows, the more deluded he becomes. Thus more kinds of knowledge can blind the eyes. We have to be careful with this word enlightenment. The light may be the glare of ignorance, which blinds and deludes the eye and gives rise to overconfidence. Blinded by the glare of ignorance, we are unable to think straight and so are in no position to defeat suffering. We waste our time with trivialities, non-essential things unworthy of our respect. We become infatuated with sensuality, taking it to be something excellent and essential for human beings, something which every man ought to get his share of before he dies. And making the excuse that we are doing it for the sake of some quite different ideal. The hope for rebirth in heaven is founded on sensuality. Attachment to anything whatsoever, particularly sensuality, comes about because ignorance has enveloped the mind, cutting off all means of escape. At several places in the texts, ignorance is compared to a thick shell covering the whole world and preventing people from seeing the real light. The Buddha placed ignorance last in the list of the 10 fetters. When a person becomes an arahant, the highest grade of Aryan, he completely eliminates the 5 remaining fetters or defilements. He eliminates desire for forms, desire for objects other than forms, status consciousness, agitation and ignorance. The 4 kinds of Aryan, stream, enterer, once, returner, never, returner and arahant, dwell in the supramundane plane. The supramundane can be recognized as having 9 aspects. The condition of the stream, enterer, while he is in the process of cutting out the defilements, is called the path of stream entry. And that when he has succeeded in cutting them out is called the fruit of stream entry. Likewise there are the following pairs: path and fruit of once returning, path and fruit of never returning, and path and fruit of arahantship, in all 4 pairs. These together with nirvana make up the 9 aspects of the supramundane. For an individual in the supramundane plane, suffering is diminished in accordance with his status until ultimately he is completely free of it. When a person once succeeds in attaining unobscured and perfect insight into the true nature of things so that he is able to stop desiring anything whatsoever, he has attained the supramundane plane, his mind has transcended the worldly condition. And when he has completely and utterly relinquished all the mental defilements, his mind is rendered permanently free of all those worldly things which formerly it liked and disliked. Nirvana is a condition not in any way comparable to any other. It is unlike any worldly condition. In fact, it is the very negation of the worldly condition. Given all the characteristics of the worldly condition, of phenomenal existence, the result of completely cancelling out all those characteristics is nirvana. That is to say, nirvana is that which is in every respect precisely the opposite of the worldly condition. Nirvana neither creates nor is created, being the cessation of all creating. Speaking in terms of benefits, nirvana is complete freedom from hellfire, scourging, torture, bondage, subjection and thraldom. Because the attainment of nirvana presupposes the complete elimination of the defilements, which are the cause of all unsatisfactory mental states. Nirvana lies beyond the limitations of space and time. It is unique, unlike anything in the world. Rather, it is the extinction of the worldly condition. Speaking metaphorically, the Buddha called it the realm where all conditional things cease to be, sankhara, samatho. Hence it is the condition of freedom from fetters. It is the end of torment and buffeting, stabbing and chafing, from any source whatsoever. This is the nature of the supramundane, the ultimate. It is the Buddhist goal and destination. It is the final fruit of Buddhist practice. In the foregoing pages we have explained systematically the principles of Buddhism. W. he have presented it as an organized practical system designed to bring knowledge of the true nature of things. In reality things are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not selves, but all creatures are attracted by things and become attached to them simply through misunderstanding. The Buddhist practice, based on morality, sila, concentration, samadhi, and insight, panna, is a tool to be used for completely cutting out grasping and clinging. The objects of our clinging are the five aggregates: body, feeling, perception, active thinking, and consciousness. When we have come to know the true nature of the five aggregates, we understand all things so well that desire gives way to disenchantment, and we no longer cling to any of them. What we have to do is lead the kind of life described as right living, samavihariyam, and be full day and night with the joy that arises out of conduct that is consistently good, beautiful, and right. This limits aimless wandering of the thoughts and makes it possible to concentrate and to have clear insight at all times. Then if conditions are right, the result is disenchantment, struggle to break loose, slipping free, or even complete nirvana. If we wish to hurry and gain quick results, then there is the line of practice called vipassana, which begins with moral purity and mental purity and carries right through to perfect and unobscured intuitive insight. By this means we can completely cut through the fetters that bind us fast to this world, and attain the final fruit of the path. This is a brief account of the whole of Buddhadhamma from beginning to end, including both theoretical and practical principles, and covering the entire subject right from the first steps to the final fruit. The whole story ends with nirvana. As the Buddha said, all Buddhas recognize nirvana as the highest good. So it behooves us to practice in order to realize and attain that which should be realized and attained. Doing this, we shall deserve to be called Buddhists, we shall gain insight and penetrate to the real essence of Buddhadhamma. If we don't practice Buddhadhamma, we shall only know about it and shall lack any true insight. It rests with each of us to practice introspection, observe and understand his own imperfections, and then try to root them out completely. Even if one is only half successful, some clear understanding will result. As the defilements are progressively eliminated, their place is taken by purity, insight, and peace. So I advise and beseech you to approach the subject in this fashion. You may then succeed in penetrating to the real Buddhadhamma. Don't waste the advantages of having been born a human being and having encountered the Buddha's teaching. Don't miss this chance to be a perfect human being. Translated from the Thai by Ariyananda Bhikkhu, Roderick S. Bucknell.